How's it going, everybody? Welcome to week 4. Cruising right along the summer course. We only have 2 weeks left, so yeah. Hopefully, you've already learned quite a bit about world history. We've got a little bit more to get there before 1500. We're kind of getting into the thousands, though, so that's good. Yeah. So yeah, we've gotten empires, we've gotten epics. Now we're kind of moving into this topic this week. Sort of. Relates to those, kind of builds upon those. One is the Silk Road. So with empires and more concentrated governments and economies comes a lot more trade. The Silk Road, it goes back quite a ways, but sort of the beginning of it was sort of when the Roman Empire, the Parthians, the Kushans, and the Han dynasties of China controlled much of these land-based overland routes, which allowed the transmissions of people's products and ideas across large scale, across long distances, right? So I talked about the Silk Road there in that lecture. Again, that's kind of your first assignment for this week too, is to be a Silk Road trader. Do make note, right, that very few, we don't have really much evidence, if any, for anyone going from China all the way to Rome, or similarly all the way from Rome to China. We will have that a little bit later in world history. So most likely these were sort of smaller circuits. So be thinking about, that's why in your Silk Road trader, don't say I'm starting in Chang'an and going to Rome, because very few people, I'm sure some people did, but we don't have the records for that. But really, it'd be these smaller circuits. So China to Central Asia, South Asia to Iran, Iran to Mesopotamia, Mesopotamia to the Mediterranean. So so when you're thinking about what you're trading, and being a Silk Road trader, what products do you have locally that you can trade? I think I talked about the ideas of trade, right? It takes things that you can create on a local scale that are wanted that are valuable in some way, that you can then trade, make it cheap, sell it high, and then kind of goes along those routes. That's why silk was so good, because it was very lightweight. You could roll it up into big spools and then sell those and wholesale. Then people could make smaller and smaller pieces out of that, which is kind of that same idea of going to Costco. Right, you buy wholesale, a big bunch of stuff. If you want to buy a big box of chips, you could, and then sell each chip individually and make more money that way. Same deal. Principles apply. So that's Silk Road. We talked about Islam, which becomes a major player within this. That it emerges circa 630 with Muhammad. Go back with the history there. The Quran, who Muhammad was. Getting the Quran, which is celebrated during Ramadan. The importance of Mecca. And then once sort of Arabia unifies under this new religion, it starts to then expand out very quickly and implement empires that we've seen in other contexts, right? Centralized governments, has an imperial religion like Zoroastrianism or Christianity in the context of the later Romans. It's kind of what we talked about, to kind of go backwards a little bit. The Byzantine Empire is when Christianity becomes a major world religion or an imperial religion with Constantine onwards. I gave a little video. It's kind of a little bit longer. It's kind of old school. It's like old school history, right? Where you got an old British dude walking around showing stuff. But it really does talk about how Christianity becomes very much infused into this Byzantine world, and then will ultimately become the world religion it is today. Islam does a similar thing through its first the Umayyad expansion in the Abbasid sort of dynasties through the height of Islam, with a lot of learning. Baghdad becomes a center of learning, a very important center of philosophy, literature, right? It's very prosperous, right on the Silk Road, right? And then similarly, China, what's going on in China and Japan during these periods is sort of seen as the classical age of both. Was the Sui, Tang, and Song dynasty of China. Tang being sort of the literary high point of Chinese history. And then Heian Japan, similarly, sort of culture, literature, Tale of Genji. So those kind of worlds as well. So yeah, that's kind of but we have all of the sort of tools, historical tools to look at this. We know what an empire is. Those things don't go away. They perpetuate. New people come to rule. They just institute these centralized systems. That's why these Islamic empires, Umayyads, and later Abbasids. And even when we look at Abbasid history, right, a new group comes in. These Turks overthrow it, but they implement and keep this imperial structure working. Same with, as we talked about in the context of China, what allows the Chinese empires to rise and fall, sort of this baseline scholar bureaucracy that keep the day-to-day functioning of the empire going through administration. These officials, government officials, have to go through these very strenuous tests in order to procure these positions. But once you do, it's very honorific to your family, and you live a pretty good life as well. Um, and so that's kind of what keeps, so the imperial families can rise and fall. New mandate of heavens can be claimed, but these scholar bureaucrats kind of keep things going, which is sort of what the Tang reading is all about with the poetry. And a lot of these scholars, these government officials, will be very familiar with, they'd be up on poetry and Confucian thought and ideas. And then similarly, Heian Japan, these court systems, we talked about sort of the imperial family, it has a role, but as we see it in Japan, the imperial family then becomes very ceremonial. Other clans take power, Fujiwaras, and as we will see, the collapse of them, a new group comes up. The tale of Heike talks about that, the Kamakura, and then Japan sort of breaks apart, decentralizes. The imperial family is still there in Kyoto, but other groups, kind of these sort of small scale, feudal, if you will, sort of decentralized powers emerge, and that's where the samurai class comes from. So, yeah. So the assignments for this: one, be a Silk Road trader. Again, be, you can record yourself just like this right on Lamaku if you want to make a little presentation and talk over it. That's fine as well. Just don't, I'm trying to kind of, it's a different type of media. I don't just like write it out, type it out, or speaking it, saying it is a little bit different, requires different mechanics, mental mechanics. And then second one, discussion post. Make sure you use the course readings in those. Again, we're just reading sections of these poems or sections of the Tale of Genji or a few sections of the Quran or Hadith. If you put in some quotes that are not in the course readings, I will assume that is generated via AI, unless you're sitting down, unless you have a copy of the Tale of Genji handy. But if not, then use the course readings. So that's showing how you're applying course materials to engaging with the course materials and being able to talk about those in an effective manner. So I think that's it. Have a good rest of your week.